Oh, push the button at the bottom, that panel right there in front of you.
Okay, right here, the,
Yeah. No.
oh, on the projector.
Must have hit it here.
Okay, right. So, so where is the...
Up to the top where it says present.
present?
You scroll on your computer, usually.
Yeah.
That's just gonna record it, so you can manipulate it with that. Just double click on it, it'll probably open it up.
Alright, is that not getting up there?
Just do it that way too, we can see it.
Alright. I'm just going to do it that way. Alright, so chapter 28 is about protists. I just put down some of the highlights from the chapter. Protists are eukaryotic, mostly single-celled organisms, and most eukaryotic organisms are single-celled. Since protists are mostly single-celled, they have to undertake functions by themselves that multicellular organisms need multicellular organs to do, which makes them, they're usually more complex than the cells of multicellular organisms. And protist diversity originates in endosymbiosis, a symbiosis where the one organism lives inside of another. Mitochondria and plastids appear to be prokaryotic cells that joined with eukaryotic cells. Mitochondria, we all know, creates ATP. Plastids are like chlorophyll, things like that. One of the clades of protists is the excavates, and they have modified mitochondria and unique flagella. One of the types of them is the diplomonids, and they have reduced mitochondria called a mitosome, which lacks the electron transport chain. They possess 2 nuclei and multiple flagella, and they're usually parasitic. Another type of excavate is the Parabasalids, and they have another type of reduced mitochondrion called a hydrogenosome, which generates some energy anaerobically and produces hydrogen as a waste product. And then there's the Euglenozoa, which is a clade of protists with a rod inside each of the flagella. The kinetoplastids have a single large mitochondrion that contains a massive DNA called a kinetoplast. That's their defining feature. And the euglenoids are a protist with a pocket at one end of the cell from which the flagella emerges. Then there's the SAR clade, and that's a clade of protists defined by similarities in their DNA. The straminophiles are photosynthetic organisms with numerous flagella, and some of them are the diatoms, which are algae that have this silicon wall that's like glass. Then there's the golden algae, which they have yellow and brown pigmentations in them. And then the brown algae, which are just multicellular algae, and like most seaweed are brown algae. They're actually not plants. They just look like plants due to congruent evolution. And then another part of the SAR clade is the alveolates, have a membrane enclosed sac under the plasma membrane. Then some of them are the dinoflagellates, and these cells are reinforced by cellulose plates that have 2 that are like armor, kind of like armor plates, and they have 2 flagella located in the grooves of the armor. And then there's the apicomplexans, and they are parasitic protists, and one end of them contains a complex of organelles, which is specifically designed to penetrate host tissues and cells to feed off the nutrients. Then there's the ciliates, and those are protists that use cilia to move, which are like the hair-like structures, and they use those to wave around in the water to move. And another part of the SAR clade is the Rosaria, and those are amoebas and protists that move with pseudopods, which are like them blobbing out and using that and dragging themselves toward that part of their body. Part of that are the Radiolaria, Larians, which contain symmetrical skeletons that radiate out from their center. So like kind of like a spider web, sort of. And then there's the forams, and they have porous shells called tests, through which the pseudopods exit through the pores, and that's how they move. And then there's the cercozoans, and their defining attribute is they use their flagella to feed on other like prokaryotes. And then I found out the red algae and the green algae are the closest relatives to land plants. The red algae contain a pigment phycothyrin, which leads to their reddish color and masks the green of the chlorophyll. Subspecies have more or less phycothyrin, meaning they are more red or reddish-green depending on the species. And then green algae, they contain chloroplasts, which give them a greenish color, and they're considered by some scientists to be an extended part of the plant kingdom because they're just so similar. And then one subgroup of protists is the uniconts, and it's closely related to fungi and animals. There's the amoebozoas, which are amoebas with tube-shaped pseudopod instead of thread-shaped pseudopods, so like their pseudopods are wider. And those include slime molds, which are like fungi, tubulins, which are heterotrophic amoebozoans with the lobed pseudopods, and entamoeba, which are parasitic amoebas. They feed off of hosts. Then there's the Opisthokonts, which are a group of protists that are really so closely related to fungi and animals that some scientists group them with them. You know, there's some differences in grouping here. And then protists, they play a key role in ecological communities. Sometimes they take energy from the sun, which provides a start to a food chain. They're a food source for one of the most basic parts of the food source. And they can also play a symbiotic role, and they can help out other species through symbiosis, which helps them both survive. And that's what I had. So.
Questions about this? Israel? This is kind of a tough chapter to go over because it's something that we don't usually come in contact with. We don't study or don't think about little Proteus laying around and doing things. Push the top button that says stop recording.
All right.